Now, some of you may be thinking, yes, that is my experience too. Others of you may be thinking, devotion is not what I signed up for when I decided to come to Harvard. If you're a visitor from another part of the university, you may be thinking, I always suspected that what they were doing at HDS was devotional. Or else you're thinking, devotion? I thought those people at HDS didn't believe in God. When I say devotion, I'm thinking of the novelist Charles Johnson, who in his book about Buddhism and writing remembers how, as a teenager, the writings of W.E.B. Du Bois and Martin Luther King Jr. kept him up late at night. Johnson's devotion to those writers and their devotion to freedom led him both to his embrace of Buddhism and to an understanding of the narrative problems he would encounter as a writer as moral, ethical problems. When I say devotion, I am thinking of the student in clinical pastoral education at the Dana-Farber Cancer Center who devotes herself to listening not only what patients say to her, but also what they do not say. I am thinking of her deliberate cultivation of reverence for both the spoken and the unspoken. When I say devotion, I am thinking of the great African theologian Augustine of Hippo, who in the midst of an anxious critique of his own education, prays that everything he reads or writes or calculates or speaks may now be offered in the service of God. When I say devotion, I am thinking about the student of first-year Hebrew or Arabic or Sanskrit who struggles through the same set of exercises over and over until those unfamiliar marks on the page begin to mean something. In other words, there are as many manifestations of devotion in the study of religion as there are those of us who study it. Or as Virginia Woolf's character, the artist Lily Briscoe, puts it in the passage from To the Lighthouse that Isabel read for us, love has 1,000 shapes. Now, following Janet Gyatso's call to experiment with the love of religion as an animating force in our work, I'd like to try to describe two crucial dimensions of what I'm calling devotion in the study of religion. You can be devoted to the study of religion as well, drawing from sources which may not seem at first to belong together. The Song of Songs, the beautiful poem of erotic love tucked away in the Hebrew Bible between Ecclesiastes and Isaiah, and the work of the great modernist writer Virginia Woolf. Woolf may seem an especially unlikely candidate for a teacher of devotion, since she was not religious in any sort of conventional way, although God is invoked far more in Woolf's work than in the Song of Songs, where God is nowhere mentioned. But I have learned a great deal about devotion from her and from the Song of Songs and from reading them together. Now, the Song of Songs, as you know, and as Bolaji brought so beautifully to life for us, is a dialogue between two lovers, a woman and a man. The opening line is spoken by the woman, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." And the lovers spend the rest of the poem trading words back and forth, praising each other's beauty in ever more inventive ways, exploring the erotic possibilities of their relationship and of language itself. Now, modern readers, particularly Protestant Christian ones, sometimes regard the song as an oddity. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the great 19th century American feminist, is representative of such readers. She called the song a mere love poem, the religious interpretations of which were only an excuse for including it in the Bible in the first place. But for devoted readers over the centuries, the Song of Songs was a key, hidden at the heart of the Bible, capable of unlocking its secrets. It was a fathomless pool of meaning one could swim and swim in one's whole life long and never sound the bottom. It was a garden in which one might encounter God walking in the cool of the day. For these readers, the Song of Songs was a text of devotion par excellence, a text to be excavated through midrash and allegory, lingered over in Lectio Divina, prayed with individually and communally. The Song of Songs is a small poem that has generated its weight in commentary many, many times over. And its capacity to mean many things at once accounts, I think, for its tremendous generative power. So does its beauty. It is so beautiful, the 16th century Spanish mystic Teresa of Avila once wrote, that even when I hear it in Latin and can't understand the words, it still moves me more than devotional texts that I can understand. Commentators like Teresa and many others, from the authors and compilers of the Midrash Rabbah to the Cistercian monk Bernard of Clairvaux, were drawn again and again to the song. Not, I think, to explain away the presence of an erotic poem in the Bible. There's just too much brilliant commentary to have been generated by that thin purpose. But because they recognized in the desire of the lovers for each other something akin to their own desire for God. Now, in the passage Balaji read for us, it's the man's voice we hear. When the woman speaks in the song, she often addresses herself to her lover's absence. Where are you, she asks again and again, seeking him outside in the fields, in the streets of their city, under the blazing noon sun, and at night. The man, on the other hand, addresses himself to his lover's presence, which he finds overwhelming. And in order to cope with it, he praises her one part at a time: her eyes, her hair, her teeth, her cheeks. If where are you is the woman's question, who are you is the man's. Who is this that looks forth like the dawn, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, terrible as an army with banners? The unknowableness born of devotion seems to me at the heart of what this poem is trying to say. That no matter how intimate we are with one another, we always remain mysteries to each other. As Bernard of Clairvaux put it in one of his many homilies on the song, there is always something farther out or farther in. The lovers in the song are so beautiful, and the poet makes us see that beauty in all its shining glory. But the lovers are also more than their beauty, more than the sum of their glorious body parts. And that more is difficult to comprehend and describe, but it is as worthy of our devotion as what we can see and know. That unknowable more that is at the heart of intimate love is also at the heart of the study of religion. Whether we are scholars of the New Testament or 12th century India, whether we have excavated our sources from the past or interviewed them in the present, whether our questions are pastoral or scholarly or a combination of both, there's always something farther out or farther in. That's why devotion is such a necessary part of our work, because the more we devote ourselves to what we study, the more our familiarity with it both deepens and recedes. The greater the care we bring to our work, the more we can sense dimensions of the texts and ideas and objects and people we study that remain beyond the reach of our analysis. Now, the lure of the unknowable, of course, is a great generator of scholarship. all of our incomplete attempts to understand each other, all of our methodologies which both reveal and conceal. The best scholarship is marked both by the profound knowledge that comes with devoted study and the humility that acknowledges the limits of our knowing. The most elegant, convincing arguments are never completely watertight. Who could believe an argument that actually was? But always they leave a door open or a window onto possibilities that we had not yet imagined. This is also true of ministry at its most humane. The 6th century Christian theologian and reluctant Pope Gregory the Great, whose book on pastoral care our Neuem Divs are soon to read, defined ministry as the art of arts. Why? Because of what is hidden from even the most wise and compassionate minister. Because, as Gregory writes, the wounds of the mind are even more hidden than the wounds of the body. That is why Gregory teaches that one pastoral approach will not meet all the human needs which ministers are asked to address, because there is always something further out or further in. And not only the best scholarship and the best ministry, but also the best art is marked by the unknowable more revealed through devotion. When Lily Briscoe, the artist of To the Lighthouse, tries to capture the object of her devotion, Mrs. Ramsay, in a painting, she thinks to herself, 50 pairs of eyes were not enough to get round that one woman with. One wanted some secret sense, fine as air, with which to steal through keyholes and surround her where she sat knitting, talking, sitting silent in the window alone, which took to itself and treasured up like the air, which held the smoke of the steamer, her thoughts, her imaginations, her desires. Some secret sense, fine as air, able to slip into the space between ourselves and others. Perhaps that is what you will cultivate here in your years at HDS. The unknowable more is Woolf's great subject and her central artistic preoccupation. She sought new literary forms that reflected what she called the populous, undifferentiated chaos of life, more realistic to her than so-called realistic fiction. Life, she wrote, is always and inevitably much richer than those of us who try to express it. In her novels, Woolf reached toward the unspoken, undescribed parts of human experience, the interior treasure and the unseen part of Clarissa Dalloway and Septimus Warren Smith, Mrs. Ramsay's wedge-shaped core of darkness, the unacted part of the characters in between the acts. Woolf's devotion to the unknowable more in human life represented for her not only an artistic challenge, but a moral one as well. 95 years ago, almost to the day, in the last months of a war that would take tens of millions of lives, she wrote in her diary that the reason why it is easy to kill another person must be that one's imagination is too sluggish to conceive what his life means to him, the infinite possibilities furled in him. Just as she imagined in 3 Guineas a new university that would teach its students not to love war, her literary project cultivates nonviolence by asking us to consider what is hidden in every person. Now, if you think this sounds a little like religious work, I agree. Woolf herself was the child of 2 very famous Victorian agnostics, and Woolf herself had no interest in joining any religious institutions, feeling in religious settings dulled and bothered by the obstacle of not believing. Unlike her friend T.S. Eliot, whose conversion to Anglican Christianity scandalized her, Woolf never felt that Christian faith was adequate to the spiritual needs of her age. As her character Bernard says in her novel, The Waves, the certainty so sonorously repeated of resurrection, of eternal life, was too neat, too confident, too tidy. Like Bernard, Woolf trusted nothing neat, nothing that comes down with all its feet on the floor. When it came to religion, she much preferred the sadness at the back of life that she found in ancient Greek thought and literature to what she called Christianity and its consolations. Now, Woolf was the daughter of agnostics, but she was also the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of activist evangelical Christians, known for their passionate commitment to the eradication of slavery and for the practices of devotion which gave shape to their lives. And although Woolf did not inherit the Christian convictions that undergirded her ancestors' life of devotion to God, she did inherit the sense that one's life and energies ought to bend in one direction, that one must discover one's work and dedicate oneself to it wholeheartedly. From childhood, Woolf committed herself first to a long apprenticeship as a writer, and then to a long career as a path-breaking author of 8 novels, 5 works of nonfiction, volumes and volumes of literary criticism, short stories, letters, and diaries. The practice of devotion that undergirds that incredible productivity derived in part from a book her Christian ancestors lived by and which she also read, William Law's A Serious Call to the Devout and Holy Life. Devotion, Law wrote, is not prayer. Devotion, he insisted, signifies a life devoted to God. The devout consider God in everything, serve God in everything. If we are to follow Christ, Law wrote, it must be our common way of spending every day. Substitute the word art for God or Christ, and you have a pretty clear picture of the way Woolf lived her life. Her friendships, her travels, her reading, her thinking, her marriage, her activism, the way she organized her days, all supported her devotion to writing, and through writing, to the unknowable more, to the infinite possibilities furled in human beings and in human experience. Out of her devotion to her art, Woolf developed a literary response to those infinite possibilities that is also a fundamental religious practice.